wanted to do my entire life was to be in law enforcement, and now that I'm going on 13 years this year, and I can't even view law enforcement the same as I have.
Megan Talkington and Brenda Lesnett, active law enforcement in the state of West Virginia, their dream job. But now everything has changed.
I don't want my daughter to walk the halls of the West Virginia State Police Academy, not unless there's reform from top to bottom.
Both women now suing the agency that trained them after an anonymous letter written to top state officials, including the governor and lawmakers, went public in February, alleging widespread misconduct within the walls of the West Virginia State Police Academy, including a hidden camera system inside the women's locker room.
I was shocked to hear that happened. I was completely appalled. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Sitting here today, I still feel exposed. And I'm constantly wondering who's going to see me next, who has already seen me.
These two West Virginia law enforcement officers, two women, are now looking to file these charges or this lawsuit against the West Virginia State Police Academy for these hidden cameras in women's changing rooms, locker rooms, bathrooms. Does that sound familiar for something that people have been concerned with? Certain people have been concerned with in our political circles, putting it towards certain folks. Have they talked about West Virginia officers with this? Not yet, but maybe they will now. By the way, the misconduct has been widespread, and it's way more than just these two officers. Their attorney, Teresa Torseva, filed this suit representing about 70 women more.
Thoughts are just constantly in your mind.
Yes, am I going to have to deal with this the rest of my life? 10 years from now, is this going to show up on the dark web, on the regular web? I don't know.
Every female that has gone through that academy, civilian or for law enforcement training, is a victim.
How many are we talking here?
Possibly
there could be thousands.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
It's a hostile, misogynistic, toxic environment that's not just male dominated, it's anti-woman.
Attorney Teresa Torseva represents about 70 women who have similar allegations, including minors who took part in a junior program at the academy.
I don't know how in the world many things could be much, much worse than that.
They're the governor at West Virginia of trying to figure out how this could be much worse, because there was some instances as he then got some of these anonymous letters about this from the get-go, then going to a weird pseudo defense of the cops before all this really took full stage. There is more of what he did say, specifically one of the people that have been accused of this whole thing. But first, yes, because there's so much here and there's more details behind it that I'm not sure everyone was really aware of. But first, there's the irony here of cameras set up in these restrooms, changing areas where women were changing, doing whatever they need to do, and then also girls, because there was a junior academy. So we've got the pedophilia, we've got the grooming, and we've got the wrong folks in the wrong locker rooms. Or maybe you can set up a camera there instead. For your first thoughts before we get to how much worse this was.
Yeah, they always say that the people who make accusations, it's because they're likely doing the things that they're accusing others of doing. And part of that is because they're the ones thinking of these things, right? I think a lot of normal people wouldn't think to put a camera in a place where women and minors are changing their clothes and things like that. So you do kind of have to be a little skeptical. We live very much in a surveillance state, whether or not we are consciously aware of it, whether or not we acknowledge it. Because sometimes it's easier to just kind of pretend like that's not what's happening. They listen in on our phones. We know that they have the technology to do a lot of things to access our inner worlds and our private lives, and they're doing it because why wouldn't they, right? Everything is about data. We are the product. Everybody wants access to our personal lives. And I don't even think it's being conspiratorial to say that, in order to control a population, you have to, keep a good eye on them. Maybe that's what's happening here. I don't know. Maybe it really is just like a perversion thing. But whatever it is, it was allowed to continue. Somebody put those cameras there. People knew that those cameras were there. Somebody was watching the footage, right? Not enough was done in response to it.
You guys did see the Governor Jim Justice talking about it. He had a little bit more to say, but there was one entity he was blaming for it. Let's more.
The state doesn't dispute a camera existed. This is how Governor Jim Justice publicly addressed it in March.
There was 3 troopers that found a thumb drive. And absolutely from that, they found the video. And then, from what I understand, one, if not all, immediately jerked the thumb drive out and threw it in the floor and started stomping on it.
Justice replaced the head of the agency and pinned the act on a high-ranking Academy official who died in 2016.
You don't think he was the only one responsible?
Common sense tells you he wasn't the only one responsible. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And it feels like you're blaming somebody who can't speak for themselves.
Torres-Ava's team names 3 current and former state police employees who they say are responsible for the recordings in a recently filed civil lawsuit, the first in what will be a long list of similar civil action taken.
It's a risk you guys.
Seems like a long road that they're going down, but Jim Justice talked about how some folks snatched out and stomped it out on the ground and destroyed the whole thing. But there was one cop who died in 2016 who's the only culprit behind this whole thing. Seems pretty easy, as they did point out there, that this would all just go on this one cop, and that's kind of it. You guys, I hope you're glad that you found out the real scandal behind this whole thing, and we've got he was got, because whatever happened to him as far as him passing away. But why the stomping out on stuff from other cops who had nothing to do with it? It's odd behavior. As a matter of fact, with that odd behavior, I wonder what it is they're doing for these victims, considering they now have to file these lawsuits, and what is they're doing to try and fix this process and this problem? Because that's something that isn't always talked about, because we just can't reform police and departments, especially when they're been discovered of things like this. One more part.
You guys are taking to file a lawsuit while you're still working. What do you fear?
I fear retaliation. I fear Brenda and I are going to have a target on our backs.
There are 2 open state investigations.
We're going to clean it up.
Where those stand, unclear. We reached out to Justice's office and the West Virginia Department of Homeland Security and got no response. The state police said no comment. Officials haven't reached out to the alleged victims either.
Crickets.
It's disheartening.
It is outrageous.
I feel like this hasn't been taken seriously. I think that there needs to be more investigation, a more thorough investigation, and I think that we all want answers.
Yeah, as we talk a lot about defunding, reallocating funds from officers and police departments, especially ones that end up don't following the law or that victimize people somewhat regularly. It happens once or twice, that's too many already. But this is one of those cases. So we'll bring up all the scandals. We'll talk about the hypocrisy around them saying, oh, look, those trans folks are the ones that are grooming children and walking into restrooms and trying to do all this. But then when we see these instances, the priesthood, many of these folks and the cover-ups that surround that, at what point can we finally start asking folks, so are you guys ready to reform the entities that have proven to be detrimental to folks? Or are you just not caring about those 14 to 17-year-old girls that were also spied upon in those locker rooms? Your last thoughts?
Yeah, well, the entities that you're referring to are more important than the actual victims of these said entities. So it's more important and it's more prudent to uphold whatever reputation these entities actually have, the way people think of them and view them as far as social institutions, right? So you talk about the church and you talk about the police forces, things like that, emergency responders, they would love to be viewed within a certain light. And whenever their actions aren't favorable to their own reputations, they have to take action against that, because these isolated incidents aren't worth jeopardizing the entire institutions. And also, like, the thing with like stomping on the thumb drive is kind of ridiculous. And he's acting like it's like a VHS or a cassette tape or something. Like, if you destroy the tape, there's no more evidence. Like, it's all gone. That's not how it works. Everything's digital. We know that.
I wonder if they found all the holes. I mean, because there was just this one guy and he passed away.
Just the one guy, yeah.
It's all over. It's done with.